Okay, so we've written all this stuff down. However, I want you guys to try it one more time to put everything in one spot. This is going to be your cheat sheet for the test that you'll want to have out when you're doing it. So let's go ahead and start filling this out. So we know that we have 3 tools in our trig toolbox. We've got Pythagorean Theorem, which is, go ahead and fill in this blank, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is Pythagorean Theorem. Now, we use this when we don't have an angle, but we're trying to find a side. Be very careful, because sometimes it looks like it's Pythagorean Theorem because there's no angle. But if we're trying to find a side, that's the only time we use this. If we're trying to find an angle, guaranteed inverse trig. So be very careful. We don't have an angle, trying to find a side. So just a refresher here, we have to remember, though, which side ends up being C, because we don't just get to pick the numbers to put in. C is special. So in this triangle, which one would I plug in for C? That would be 5. Now there's 2 reasons why. One is that it is the side across from the right angle is C, the hypotenuse. 5 is across from our right angle, so it has to be C. Now, it also ends up being the largest side, but sometimes we don't know that. We can't tell that, what the largest side is. So when we have a picture, it's the side across from the right angle. If we only have numbers, it's the biggest side. Our next tool we have is regular trig, which we know our setup looks like this. Whatever our trig function is, sine, cosine, tangent of our angle, equals our fraction, and then we cross multiply and go from there. Remember, it's possible after you cross multiply, we might have to do other things. Did you get my text? Okay, that's fine. I can edit this, so I don't mind. Sorry, I totally forgot I had to record a video. So if you just want to like get out of your room and sit and no, I'm almost okay. No, you're good. Okay, I'm sorry. I totally forgot. Okay. Sorry. Bye. So again, we have to cross multiply, and then we might have to do something else. Don't forget, guys, it's not always, oh, just go straight to the calculator. No. After you cross multiply, you have to get the x, the thing we're looking for, by itself. So that might be another step. So look over your notes, look over all the problems you did. They're not all done the same, so be careful. Now again, we use this when we have a number given to us for the angle. Guaranteed, if you see an angle number, if it says 20 degrees, 5 degrees, whatever, guaranteed regular trig. Inverse trig is the only tool we have when we are trying to solve for an angle. So remember that inverse trig, you have to use the special button. This is not something you type in, it's a special button, and then we just plug it into the calculator. Inverse trig, fraction, boom, straight into the calculator. Inverse trig questions are super easy because you don't got to cross multiply or do anything like that. Now, it's been a while since we've had to do this, but we also had questions way back when where they ask if a triangle is acute, right, or obtuse. So remember that our setup looks like this. We kind of flip Pythagorean Theorem, put c squared on the left, and all we have to do is compare them. We have to compare what c squared equals to what a squared plus b squared equals. So let's just refresh our memories here. If they are equal, what type of triangle is it? This is a right triangle because if they're equal, that's Pythagorean Theorem and it's only true for right triangles. Now, if the number on the left is less than, if you want to write less than instead of the symbol, because if you're not very good with knowing the inequality symbols, you might want to put less than. If c squared is less than this, what is our triangle then? Acute. Less than, think acute. So this has to be greater than, so this has to be obtuse. Greater than, think obtuse. Less than, think acute. Now again, we can only think that way when c squared is on this side, so be careful. If you have this flipped, where a squared plus b squared is on the left, you can't think that way, so we got to be careful there. So you want to have all this copied down. This is your cheat sheet for the test. I'm going to do one example problem of each type. You're just going to try it. I'm going to work through it, and then we'll go from here. So I want you guys to go ahead and try this question. You're trying to find angle A. Look at your cheat sheet for what tool you're going to use and do the whole problem. Okay, so we have angle A. What we need to do is mark the angle we want so that we can label our sides. This is going to end up being inverse trig. Find an angle, guaranteed inverse trig. So A happens to be across here. This is the opposite. If I walk through my triangle, that's the opposite. I label my hypotenuse next, which is across from the 90. And I could go ahead and label this side I don't have, which would end up being the adjacent. It's all that's left over. But I've already labeled my two sides. I don't need this side, so I'm not going to label it. It's the adjacent. We look at our friend SOHCAHTOA, and we see what we have labeled and pick our trig function. You should have picked sine, right? That's opposite over hypotenuse. Now, because this is inverse trig, again, look back to your cheat sheet. We wrote that it's the inverse trig function, sine, inverse, fraction. And all we have to do is go straight and plug it in the calculator. Your fraction should have been the opposite over the hypotenuse. O over H should have been 35 over 60. 60 over 35 will get you a wrong answer. It has to be 35 over 60. And be careful that we're doing inverse. You should have gotten that your angle A is what we're trying to find, equals 35 point, I'm going to round this to 7. If you rounded it to 35.6, that's okay. Okay, try the next one. So once again, use your cheat sheet. Figure out which tool we are using. Go ahead and try the whole thing. Okay, find CD, and I don't have an angle to use. This is Pythagorean Theorem. I'm going to go ahead and write the whole thing anyways. Pythagorean Theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I'm going to go ahead and label my side that I want with the letter that it goes with. So be careful here. Again, when you did this, hopefully you remembered from your cheat sheet that what's across from the right angle, that's C. This has to be C. You can't put it anywhere else. Yes, we know what it is, but that is in the C position. It has to go in the C position in the equation. So I'm going to call 6A, and I'm going to call this B. I could have called 6B if I wanted to. It doesn't really matter. Those can switch, but C has to be C. So here's a possible setup. I need 6 squared plus B squared is what I'm trying to find. Equals 13 squared. Again, doesn't matter if I know it or not. The side across from the right angle, the hypotenuse, has to go in place of C. So I'm going to simplify this. We got 36 plus B squared equals, I know what 13 squared is, but I'm going to double check, 169. We're going to subtract that 36 over. We got B squared equals 169 minus 36, 133. And then don't forget, guys, you're not done here. You haven't solved for the missing side. You solved for B squared, and we need just B. So what undoes a square is a square root, and we got to do it to both sides. So square root of 133 equals, you should have gotten 11.5. So careful with Pythagorean Theorem, guys. Don't forget your last step. You have to take the square root of your answer as your last step. Okay, and then go ahead and try this one. Oh, man. Okay, so this one, we have an angle, guaranteed. This is going to be regular trig. We talked about that on our cheat sheet. Is it good? I can cut this out. I don't care. Are you good?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Okay, so we needed to label our sides. Now, notice here, I'm going to go ahead and put X for the side that I'm trying to find. You don't have to, but I like doing that because it helps me focus on that I'm trying to find this side. So you should have labeled your sides. I always label my opposite first. Notice that I don't need the opposite though, so be careful with that. I label my hypotenuse second, across from the right angle. That leaves 10 to be the adjacent. So if you need to pause the video and fix if you picked the wrong trig function, we should use the adjacent and the opposite. Look at SOHCAHTOA and make sure you pick the right trig function. Okay, you should have picked cosine, ka, right? A over h. So our regular trig setup is, things are regular now, so cosine is going to be married to my angle because this is regular trig. In a regular world, the trig function is married to the angle. Only in inverse world are they divorced and separate. And then we have our fraction. Fraction should be 10 over x. So we should know that once we get to this point, we need to pretend we have two fractions and cross multiply. Now watch very carefully, guys. This doesn't happen every time. Do not think that every question is done the same. X times cosine 25. X cosine 25. We have 10 times 1 is 10. Notice that x isn't by itself. Guys, I can't go to the calculator yet. X isn't by itself. What I can do is get x by itself. Since this means x times cosine 25, to undo that multiplication, I need to divide by cosine 25. I know this is weird, but if you just imagine that cosine 25 is just a number, it just got some letters in it, then we can work with it like it's a number. So now that x is by itself, now we can go to our calculator. 10 divided by cosine 25. We should get 11.03. Yeah, is it from, yeah, that's fine. I'm pretty sure he's just kind of giving those away. So once more, guys, do not assume that you're always just going to be, oh, the number times the trig function. No, sometimes it's division, sometimes multiplication. You have to look at each question separately. Okay, so another example here. We are trying to determine if it's acute, obtuse, or right. Look back to your cheat sheet. We have a certain setup. Go and try it. Okay, so our setup was c squared. We have a squared plus b squared on the right. You have to set it up this way. What c has to be is your largest side. It has to. So what's our largest side here? 15 squared. Careful. This is just c, and we need c squared. So this can be a and this can be b. Doesn't matter which is which. We can switch those. So I have 8 squared, because it's a squared, plus 12 squared. So we're going to look at these sides separately. 15 squared is 225. And 8 squared is 64. Plus 12 squared is 144. I'm going to go ahead and add these together. We get 208. So here's what we have on both sides. So what we need to do now is compare them. This will tell us acute, obtuse, or right. So what do we have? Is this side equal to, less than, or greater than the other side? It's greater than. So your answer should have been obtuse. If c squared is greater, think obtuse. That's the answer. If it was less than, we'd say acute. If it was equal, we'd say right. Okay, this last one is what we practiced yesterday. You gotta draw the picture yourself. So take a moment, try to draw the picture, and then come back to check before you keep going. Because if you draw the picture wrong, you're gonna get it wrong. Be very slow, try and imagine this situation. Okay, so a hawk sitting on a tree branch. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw that. It's a tree. Here's my hawk. If you wanna get creative and draw a tree and draw a hawk, you totally can. Here's the hawk up here. Spots a mouse on the ground 15 feet from the base of the tree. So here's the tree, 15 feet from the base. Again, guys, you got to understand how to visualize this. It tells you. Think, what would that look like? The hawk swoops down towards the mouse. Here's the mouse. Hawk swoops down towards the mouse at an angle of 30 degrees. That's where that angle goes, because from the hawk is where that's coming. How far does the hawk have to fly to reach the mouse? Careful. This is not asking for the height of the tree. It's asking for this distance. So that's your x. So fix your picture real quick if you need to, and then solve this problem. We should know what tool in our trig toolbox to use. Okay, you should have used regular trig. 15 is the opposite. X is the hypotenuse. Looking at SOHCAHTOA, we pick our trig function. And if this is the opposite and the hypotenuse, that is sine once again. So we have sine of 30 equals our fraction. Careful and check you did your fraction correct, guys. It doesn't matter what the opposite is. It has to go on top. I can't say it enough. O over H means your fraction has to be 15, which is the opposite, over X, the hypotenuse. We cross multiply here. We've got X times sine 30. We've got 15 times 1 is 15. Again, guys, X is not by itself. Can't go to the calculator yet. You can only go to the calculator once X is by itself. So if you end up like this, don't forget, all you gotta do is divide the trig function over. It's multiplying with the X currently, so we are going to undo it and divide. So now that X is by itself, now we can plug in the calculator. Oops, 15 divided by, sine 30, as it ends up being 30. So again, guys, sometimes it'll be division. Sometimes it'll look like this. You don't know until after you've cross multiplied. Please do not make that assumption that it's going to be this or it's going to be this. You only know if after you've cross multiplied, if the X is by itself or if it's not by itself yet. So I wanted to go through one example. I know I went through them kind of quickly, but from here, you're going to go ahead and do the quizzes. To try it all on your own, you have these problems to refer to in your cheat sheet. Please ask me if you have questions.